Welcome to our free class on SQL Basics. So this is part of the Data Science Masterclass, and we're going to start with the SQL Basics. So without further ado, let's just get started. So this will be the first lesson. You'll have 8 free lessons on SQL that I'll provide every resource for free, and I'll explain everything to you for free. And we are aiming, by the time we complete these modules, you should be at intermediate level on SQL and other skills that we teach. And finally, at data science, you should be at intermediate level once we are done. So what do we start with? We start with the basics of SQL. And the basics of SQL is, first of all, databases. Then we go to RDBMS, and then we go to the relational and non-relational databases. So what is a database? A database is just a collection of related information. For example, your phone book or the gallery of photos in your phone, that is a database. A database could be in a paper, a database could be on your phone, a database could be just stored anywhere. But what are the real world examples that we could have? For example, all of you have probably gone to university or probably been in a school setup. And what happens in school setups is you have student marks, you have student names, you have student IDs. All these are stored as records. And so other examples are your M-Pesa, those are transactions, hospital patient records, pharmacy, these are drug names, supermarket, you have products or SKUs. So this PPT will be provided to you, so you can just download it and use it for your reference. Secondly, we have DBMS. This is a database management system. It's a software that helps us to interact with the database or the data inside the database. And please note, this is not the actual database. Its objective is for the effectiveness of retrieving and storing of the data in the database. But what are the advantages that we have on the database management system? There's easy management, as I've said, security, backup. You can import and export. All these things, we're going to learn them or practically do them as we go on. And it's important because it helps us do what we call CRUD operations. CRUD operations stand for create, read, update, and then delete. So what are the types of databases? We have relational databases and we have non-relational databases. Relational databases have tables, and tables have rows and columns. Columns are like a customer name, and then we have the first row we have Breton, the second row we have Jane, the third row we have John, the fourth row we have somebody else. So that is a relational database. An example would be MySQL, Postgres, MS SQL. But non-relational ones do not have tables. So they could either be key value pairs, something we have MongoDB, we have Cassandra. These are non-relational databases. So they could be key value pairs, they could be document based like MongoDB, or they could be graphs. So these are two examples of tables, and I would like you to look at them and tell me if there's any relationship between the two tables. So we have a student table. This is a student ID, there's a student name, and there's a course ID. Then we have a courses table that has a course ID and a course name. So if you look at the two tables, or if this was a database and you have a student table and you have a course table, where would be the relationship between these two tables? Just take a moment and look at them and then think through it. So the relationship would be at the course ID, because the courses would be tied to a particular student in a university or a school. But there's one thing you need to note. Every table in relational databases has a primary key. And the primary key is what you use to relate to another table, what we call a foreign key. But we'll be getting deeper into these concepts as we go on. So the other basic we need to know is, we have already looked at database, we have already looked at database management system. Now we look at relational database management system, RDBMS. It's does the same thing as a DBMS, but now this one is for relational databases only. As I mentioned, MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, and MS SQL. So finally, let's look at the gist of the course, which is the SQL, or structured query language. This is how we relate, or how we query data from the database, or how we interact with data inside the database. But what is a query? A query is It's like a question. Queries are requests. Like how you'd go to, let's say, Jumia, because we mainly shop online on Jumia. If you go to Jumia and search for a particular product, you're querying their database. If you go to a platform like TikTok and query somebody's username so that you find them, you're querying TikTok's database. So you need to simply understand that underneath what you're doing or the search term that you're passing is a query or an SQL query that has been written based on whatever they're using. They could be using GraphQL or whatever else they could be using. But that is just basically how you need to understand. And SQL language has few elements. It has DDL, which is data definition language, and these are used to define the structure of the database itself. Things like create, alter, and drop. We'll be doing this practically in the subsequent classes. Then we have data manipulation language. As you can hear, manipulation. So these commands are used for managing data within database objects. It's like in a table, you could insert, you could update. Updating is modifying the existing data. For example, you could take my name in a student database and change my name from Breton to my other name, Gitonga. So that is updating. And then you could either delete, which is totally removing the record. So we dealt with data definition language, data manipulation language, and now we're going to deal with data control language, which controls the access of data in the database. So it's not really about the data itself, but the access. So these are things like grant, where you grant permissions, or you could revoke by removing access to various privileges. And then the data query language, which is used specifically for querying data, and you'll be using it a lot, especially the select, which is a main which is a main command that is used for data query language. So there are four elements: data query language, data control language, data definition language, and data manipulation language. Those are the four languages. But what is the key difference in these four if you have keenly looked at what we have talked about? So the biggest difference is DDL, DML, and DCL alter the structure, manipulate, and control access to the database. But the DQL is solely focused on fetching and viewing the data. If you do select all in a student table, you get all the records, and that is DQL. Select is in DQL. If you do an update of the record, you're manipulating the access, you're manipulating the data in the data or the structure in the database. But for DQL is solely for fetching and viewing the data. So you have various data types in relational databases. How you store the data in the tables. You could have integers. This could be a big int or a normal integer. You'll have decimals, you'll have floats, you'll have booleans, which is a true or false. You'll have a date time, which you have a timestamp, a date or time. You'll have a blob. For binary large objects, this could be things like images or audio, and you could have text. This is for long text. So these are the various data types that we will be using when we're dealing with when we're dealing with various rows or records inside the databases, and we're going to be mainly dealing with the relational database. And with that, I think we should be done. You can go to gitongabreton.com, put in your email, and you'll be receiving such updates as we release them. And then finally, this is how you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Gitonga Breton. That is my phone number, and that is my website. So we have come to the end of the first class. Make sure to like and subscribe, and also comment on what you have learned from this lesson. So that is the first lesson, SQL Basics. Bye bye. See you in our second class.